Welcome to the Introspection and Banter Podcast. I'm Anthony.
Gabe?
Gabe,
Yep.
do you think time travel's possible?
Not yet with the current technology, I don't think.
So you do think it is at some point possible?
Well, theoretically, you know how they say when the faster you travel, right?
Yeah.
Time slows down.
Yeah.
Theoretically, if you were to able to achieve the speed of light, theoretically speaking, time should like stop for you. If you were somehow able to go faster than that, shouldn't time reverse?
Really?
I don't know. I'm not I'm not a scientist.
I feel like what you're saying sounds familiar. I just can't think of what exactly that would be, like time travel wise. Um, do you think there's any form of time travel like available now, or
Well,
like that's
here's the thing, technically everything travels through time.
yeah,
Like right now we're traveling through time. We're in the present as we move through the physical space, so time is still passing as we're existing. So we're traveling forwards through time at the what we would I guess we could call it the standard rate, what is typical.
yeah.
Um so technically in that sense time travel is possible. I assume what you mean is time travel to the future or the past possible,
Oh,
correct?
yeah. Yes.
The thing is, we're always traveling forward. Question is, can we travel backward? And I think with the current technology that we have, we cannot travel backwards in time. I think, yeah, I don't think it's possible to travel back in time at the moment. I don't think we are able to achieve. I guess if we're going with the whole like scenario that I brought up earlier, the
Yeah.
if you travel faster than light,
Yeah.
that is not possible yet with any technology that we have.
Wha Yeah. Um, what do you think sort of possibilities would be needed to, like, travel into the future?
I think like something like the Star Trek thing.
Yeah.
Have you? I don't know if you ever watched the original Star Trek series, but there are a few episodes where they actually travel back in time, and it's because they travel super fast. Like I think the first time they do it, they accidentally slingshot off a sun's gravity field to go super fast, like faster than they normally go.
Okay.
Uh, and it caused them to go back in time, which is weird because I did bring up the whole time travel through speed of light
Mhm.
scenario back in the day. Technically speaking, like the ships in Star Trek already like travel faster than light. Warp speed, it's super fast. At least compared to like typical like sublight speeds. But yet somehow by going even faster than that, they're able to like go back in time. And they do it like quite a few times. I think they do it a few times in the show, and then they do it like in twice in the movie.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, I don't think time travel is possible in the near future, like at
I
all.
mean, I'm sure that you're right, like, that's gotta be something that's, like, way off out there. Um, are you familiar with Steins Gate? Like, I know I've mentioned to you. Do you know much about it?
All I know about it is two things. Everything you told me about it, and that there's a cute boy in it. That's it.
So, there's they have this weird, concept, I've never seen it before in anything, where they send their consciousness at the present, like time that they are, to the past.
Hmm. So
And
like the
they
mind goes back, but not the body.
yeah. And the thing too, with it is it also puts in, like, your current, like, mood and shit too. Like, your whole image of yourself at that moment,
Yeah.
which is, pretty weird. And then, before that, though, they find a way to manipulate time where they can send a text to the past and they can tell someone to do something, or, like, they can ask something. They can just send information. and doing that, they're able to change one of the genders of the characters, which is the cute boy you mentioned.
They ruined him. They got rid of his penis and they ruined him.
Yeah. And like I think that's an interesting way. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily time travel, but like time manipulation.
Time
If
manipulation.
like, do you think that makes sense?
It was like I think you mentioned to me like it's like they send messages in the past which cause like things to
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
I mean, that's still technically time travel, I would argue, right? You're sending even if you're not sending physical stuff in the past, you're sending like I don't know. How do the messages take form in Stein Gaze? Is it like
They're a text message
text
that you can
messages?
send, and so they can only send them during like any time that cell phones were popular, but they can send a text message and delete it, and they just have that information now. Like, hey, you can
Y-
tell yourself in the past to buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah, so they can send like information.
Yeah,
How do timeline changes happen then? Like if they manipulate something, does that affect like the current timeline? Are they aware of the changes or?
I I don't know how that like you're getting in like a whole timeline aspect of it. Like, wait, what do you mean?
Well,
What,
like let's say I'm on this like the current timeline, it's like
yeah.
Donald Trump is president or something like that, right?
Okay.
If I were to go back in the past and manipulate the timeline and I make it so that he doesn't win presidency, then automatically like
Oh,
I'm on a
none of them
different
remember.
timeline.
Is that what you're
None
asking?
of yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah, yeah.
asking. Like it's just so
No
like
one
is
remembers.
there so technically are they killing themselves every time they manipulate the
You
timeline?
I think you can almost think of it like that. Like, you're no longer the individual that you were.
Exactly.
So, Futurama, like, what do you think of that?
Oh right, because he time skips to the future technically.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say that's time travel per se. Well,
No.
like, yeah, he does move to a different time.
Oh, I mean he does, but like physically he doesn't really, does he? Because all he it is that he just gets frozen, right?
Yes.
It's not like he jumps forward. He just freezes himself and then ends up in like the future,
Yeah.
or at least
Which
future relative to him.
I think that's one of the most logical ways you can think of a sort of time travel per sense. And my other thought too is like with time travel, like you gotta like be able to come back to your own time or something. Like,
I think I think when most people think time travel, they think displacement, right?
yeah,
Like burying yourself in the sand and waking up like 1,000 years later is not time travel, right? Which is essentially what happens in Futurama, right? He freezes himself, wakes up in the future, like in the future relative to us. That's not really time travel, I would argue. It's like those worms that they found in the ice in the permafrost that melted and they started to
mhm.
come to life after like a few thousand years, and it's just like, oh, those worms didn't really time travel. Their bodies were just frozen.
Okay, all right. So now I got a weird thought. All right, what if when he got to the future, he got to the year 3000, they had the technology for time travel, all right, and it could only send him back to the past.
See, now that would be time travel, sending someone back to the past. The question is, would it be his past though? Would it be a different past?
Uh
Here's
I
where
don't
we get to the
know.
yeah. Here's where we get to the whole timeline thing, where it's just like
Yeah, yeah, because like like he could be in a completely different like what are all the variables? Like how do they know they're all going to stay the same?
exactly, and the fact is that he's in the past automatically changes his timeline, right? Because it's like, hey, I want to travel back to 1990. Thing is, there was no Gabriel in 1990, right? So the moment I travel back in time, I'm now in the 90s. That timeline is forever changed because I'm in the 90s. You understand? It's a
Yo,
different timeline, technically.
what happened to the old you?
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I asked it when we were talking about Steins Gate. Did they kill themselves, technically? Or if it's technically the old me is in the 90s, but as the timeline continues, it's gonna be a complete different Gabe because it's a completely different timeline. You understand?
That's yeah, yeah.
So then what happens to the old me if he never existed? Or are the timelines separate? Do they exist separately from one another? That's the real question.
Logically, couldn't you do, like, a bunch of time traveling and just come back to exactly the time you're at that very moment?
I mean, the thing is like when you keep changing the timeline, you have to ask yourself, won't you make a paradox, right? Because if you essentially change the timeline to the point where you would never have a reason to go back in time, but then you never went back in time to change to change the timeline in a way that would cause it to change, to cause it to for you to not to go back in time.
Yeah,
If you get what I'm trying to say.
I do.
Okay.
It's like some wild shit. Wait, what was, the Gordon Freeman in Half-Life? He,
Yes.
from 1 no, from yeah, 1 to 2, what he was an animated suspension?
Something like that. Yeah, it's not. I don't think it's time travel. It's like freezing yourself. The G
Yeah,
Man
no,
essentially
that's
just took him.
so alright, you think we could agree then, like, the whole, like, Fry freezing himself thing, that was just your animate like, you're suspending yourself in time.
Yeah, you're not
Okay,
really like it's just your body. Like I wouldn't even say suspending in time. I would say just suspending your body. Your body's still there and it's still like around. I mean, time is passing around it. You just don't feel it because you're like unconscious.
yeah.
But
That's
time is still
interesting
passing
too.
around you.
No, yeah, I know what you mean.
A rock doesn't time travel, even though it doesn't really feel this passing of time. Just as way as a frozen body wouldn't technically
Yeah,
time travel. Um, time travel is weird that you like. The thing is like we can't do it yet, so we don't really know how it works. We have our theories for it.
yeah,
In
that's
terms of like the timeline thing, which I think really presented it well.
shoot,
Back to the Future.
really?
Yeah, because
It
that
yeah,
was like if you look at all the movies, that was the whole point. Like when what's his face Biff, I think, right?
mhm,
His name. He goes back in time. He changes it. He says, "Can we just go back to the future?" He says, "No, because we're on a different timeline now." Right? They're travelers, so they switch timelines. The moment when he went back in time to like tell himself to he gave himself the almanac of like the sports wins or whatever. He
yeah,
changed the timeline, which then caused him to what's it called? Caused him to like become super rich in the future. So when he went back to his own present, it was already changed. The only
I
way to
agree, they
Mhm.
do that movie, like, pretty well in the way they display it.
the,
Uh,
only, the only
I
thing that bugs me about it is like if the thing was changed, then how the hell did the future Biff ever go back in time? Right?
yeah.
It's a paradox. But I guess if you accept the theory that timelines exist independently of each other, then it's okay. It makes sense.
I do think the idea that, I I I mean, the movie I think is pretty well, but the idea, like, that they use a car and all of that, I always thought was kind of dumb.
It's also weird. It's like time travelers who time travel and end up in the exact same spot
Yeah.
because the Earth is always constantly moving.
Yes! Yes! I saw a theory about that, like, this dude was saying, he's like, "I think time travel actually exists." He's like, "I think it's very much possible." But the thing that doesn't exist is space travel. We can't lock in a coordinate in space. And he talked about how people that like could time travel if they tried, they would just end up somewhere else in space.
Yeah, which is why I like things like Doctor Who, where they have actual coordinates to put, or like where they actually have to put in coordinates. Where you
Yeah,
can argue that probably the actual location coordinates are probably part of the coordinates. Like
makes sense.
the Doctor travels in a ship, so it makes sense that when he travels to Earth, he's actually traveling to wherever Earth is at that point in time. But it's like things like Life is Strange, where she goes back in time, and is just like, but the Earth wasn't there. Like the Earth spins and it's going moving really fast, right? If
Yeah,
you're stationary, right? The Earth is not gonna be where it was like 5 seconds ago, or 5 minutes ago, or 30 years
it's
ago.
it's gonna be a million miles away.
Forget, yeah, it's gonna be because it's rotating around the sun. which is part of the Milky Way. Which, if I'm not mistaken, the arms of the Milky Way galaxy are spinning, and the galaxies are moving. Like they get closer to each other, they collide with one another. So like the Earth is nowhere near where it was before. Like the Earth in, let's say, a couple thousand years ago was not in the same spot, which is why the stars are different, and also
Yeah,
because stars are dying. But you know what I'm trying to say.
yeah. So, what do you think the whole "life is strange" idea of thinking about it, or like the butterfly effect?
Or like the smallest things lead up into bigger things.
Well, I mean, so the person
Or I
time
think,
travels because it's like a power they have.
yeah. Before we get into the whole Life is Strange discussion, I just want to say, spoiler alert. We're going to talk about like certain things. Okay.
Yeah,
So for listeners who don't want to get spoiled on Life is Strange because you want to play that game, just know we're going to talk about some plot details. Okay. So the whole thing with Life is Strange is because the fact she saves Chloe by time
yeah,
traveling, it causes a gigantic ass storm to come in, right?
yeah.
I feel like that theory ties into like the chaos theory, where like the smallest things have the biggest effects, can have big effects on like reality, which I think is true. But I don't know. In the case of Life is Strange, it's like I don't see how saving one girl's life led to like a natural disaster happening. 'Cause usually when it comes to like chaos theories, like it's logical in some way, right?
Mhm.
Like the smallest details lead to other things. Like Lucifer had a angel whose whole power was manipulating small things to lead up to bigger things. Like his power is chaos theory.
Mhm.
So we
Okay.
see like he purposely like puts a skateboard out. The mom walks in, trips on a skateboard, gets pissed, starts yelling at her son. Her son walks out the door, the dog runs out, the dog runs into the street, which causes a car to swerve, which causes a car accident, which nearly kills someone. That's chaos theory, right? If the skateboard wasn't where it was, it would have been fine. Like none of that shit would have happened. But it was there, which caused all this shit to happen. I don't see how saving Chloe's life somehow made like what was it, a tornado or something?
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't see
yeah.
how a tornado could have caused all that shit, you know?
Nah,
Like just because Chloe was alive.
I don't know, like
Which is why I don't.
you saying that. I know, like there's other series that Steins Gate, which I've mentioned. It has like variables and something else. Uh,
Yeah, like
like some things always change, some things like aren't gonna change unless you change something else.
yeah, like eating extra vegetables to ruin a character.
And one of the characters, oh yes, wow. uh, well, one of the characters in Steins Gate, something tragic happens, and the main character is like, "Well, I'm gonna go back in time, prevent this from happening." Except he keeps trying to prevent it, and it keeps happening,
I love
like
those type of
50
stories.
different ways. Like, and he gets more wild with it. He's like, We're just going to run away this time. We're just gonna leave," and it still happens.
I love those types of stories, like the idea that certain points are in time are fixed in its fate.
Yeah,
It's a Doctor Who uses that. They have this thing called fixed points in time, which are points in time that are too important that they actually cannot change, and that they will still happen no matter how much you manipulate it. And it's interesting because you cannot change those points in time. Like I think there's an episode where he tries to change one, and it's like this group of people were supposed to die on Mars. He purposely saves them, but the woman ends up killing herself on Earth.
wow.
Which so like the point in time was fixed. She's always meant to die. Doesn't matter what. I think I think the whole idea of fighting against fate makes for like some interesting storylines. I think that's the whole point with
I
like
could agree with that.
Fire Emblem Awakening as many issues as it has story wise. I think does a great job of like the whole fate. I know people complain about like the decisions you make in that game don't really matter, and they really don't. But I think that just adds to the whole theme of like the warriors against fate. That's what the future children are like fighting against what their past and are fighting against what it seems to be fate. Like Emerin in both timelines, in the original timeline and the new timeline, she dies no matter what. Whether or not she died during the assassination attempt or like later on, she still dies. No, so for like in the perspective of the children, it's like a fixed point in time. Like no matter what they do, Emerin dies. No matter what they do, there's still a war with like Pelagia. No matter what they do, Walhart does, I don't know, conquers Vom, and they're trying to stop Destiny from like completing itself. Yet it seems like for the most part to be completing itself, even if it's like in different ways.
Yeah. I
Which
think what's so wild about that game too is like as you're watching it, like the characters and you already know what's happening because it already happened in the game for you, but you're in the past. Because I mean, you know that Grima is gonna try taking over
rise,
the world, and you're just trying to prevent it from happening.
yeah, and then and for some of the characters, it already happened,
Yeah,
and then the other half of the character hasn't happened yet. That's why I think like Lucina must be super traumatized because she's gone back in time to prevent certain shit from happening, yet it's still happening. So by the time she like joins your army and reveals herself to be like Crom's future daughter, she must think like fate is like set in stone, right? Because she couldn't prevent her aunt from dying. The war like still goes on. Like she must think like, wow, I came back to the past, but I can't change anything. Like
yeah.
not in any like momentous way anyway. But that's the whole point. Like it's like the whole thing is like, oh well, actually they overcome fate itself. By the end of it, Grima does not rise. Grima dies.
I think Fire Emblem Awakening has like a really good story.
Yeah,
Almost feel like it shouldn't have been a Fire Emblem game.
I think sometimes like it's fine to shit on it because it does have its issues, like the game itself. But like
Yeah,
I think sometimes people don't really realize like how good like that story is. Sometimes it's not perfect, but I do think it's pretty decent. Like it's better than what people give it credit for.
yeah, because even the characters that come back to the past are traumatized by like the shit that happened in the future.
Yeah, children have like gone through some deep shit. Oh man, you know it's interesting. Have you played the DLC for it?
No, I'm not.
Oh, bro. Even like even in Fate, we're getting a little sidetracked here. I apologize, guys. Even in Fate's fucking the DLC for Fates is amazing. I don't know what it is. Fire Emblem DLC with the children, like that usually involves like the children.
Yeah,
So fucking good. There's
I saw some of the dating scenes for the
the what scenes?
not the dating. When the characters meet each other.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say like the Future Past DLC where like they go to like a different timeline. It's
Yeah,
like the worst timeline where Naga's dead. It's fucking like great to see like just how like fucked and traumatized the children are, and when they meet like their parents from like complete different timeline, they're like, "Hey,
yeah. Are you familiar with ReZero?
Reezer, is that the one where like the guy dies
Yeah.
and resets himself every time he dies?"
Yes.
I know nothing about it except for like that one like or two shorts that they made for what was it Funhouse made? No, not Funhouse. Rebel House made.
Yeah.
Cat boys.
I I
Friend.
think it kind of falls under the category of like time loop more so than time travel. Uh but I always thought the show had such a cool and interesting concept. Which if anyone doesn't know, when the character dies, he goes back in time to a certain point.
I think
Like
I think for this episode we just need to put like a gigantic spoiler alert because we're just gonna be like discussing like different things that are gonna.
it's not a spoiler for that show.
Okay, he
I
time
mean,
travels, guys. Every time he dies, he goes back in time.
all right, it happens in the first
Ooh,
episode.
those are also pretty interesting. Those like time loops,
Yeah.
whereas like it's not like Not like Groundhog's Day where he just goes to sleep and wakes up in the same
I,
day, but like dying and going back in time with like future knowledge. It's pretty interesting, I think.
I think it's way like Groundhog's Day. I think almost kind of set the point. Like, oh, like look at this interesting concept. But I feel like ReZero took that shit and made it like way more cooler. Because Groundhog's Day was just like okay, like by the end of it, the main character was like so fucking just done with it. He was like, how can I get out of this?
You know, back in high school, and me and Danny were thinking about making a video game. One of the concepts we wanted to work with was a RPG where like you had to stop the coming apocalypse, but you
Yeah,
failed a few times, and every time you will go back in time at the end of like the apocalypse, you would have more knowledge. You would learn more things and you could use it to your advantage. We slowly realized that we were two teenagers who had very little programming experience and we're like, yeah, you know what? We can't really fucking make this in the way that we wanted to. But like, I think it's interesting to have like stories like that as well, or games and stuff like that.
oh, I agree.
What else does it? It's Groundhog Day that does the time loop.
Uh,
ReZero.
ReZero. I Charlotte. Do you know Charlotte?
I don't know anything about Charlotte. What's that?
All right. It's an interesting one. So there's a character in the anime, and he can go back in time, but again, there's a tragedy that happens, and he's trying to prevent it from happening. Now, this one's interesting because he can't keep traveling back in time. Like he can't be stuck in a time loop because he's losing his eyesight every single time. I mean, I thought it was like a weird thing to go at, but yeah, he only has so many limits to the amount of times he can travel back in time.
Kind of like Life is Strange.
Yeah, what? Yeah, the main character, what she got sick or something?
She gets
Is that
sick.
what
She
happened?
starts bleeding. I think.
Yeah. I think they had something like that in the Butterfly Effect as well. I can't quite remember. Like, I'm pretty sure he kept trying to time travel and it was like starting to fuck with his health.
Yeah, I mean it's a great way to make sure like to put limits on your character by making it so they can't time travel like a lot.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Especially because, like, in Charlotte, you're watching and the character is, like, slowly starting to not be able to see more and more.
You just gotta make sure it's consistent though, because it's like it can get really stupid when like your character all of a sudden just can't time travel. Like, oh, all of a sudden they feel sick, and you haven't established pretty well that, hey, if you use it this many times, you're gonna start to get sick, and you're not gonna
I
be
could
able to
agree
do
with
it
that.
anymore.
And
I
you
don't
also need
remember.
to establish, how sick are they? Like, what's wrong with them? Like, I don't wanna say, like, yeah, they're bleeding from the nose. Like, is it fucking up their brain? Like,
I haven't played Life is Strange too much, and I based on what I've seen, and based on what I've seen from other people, I don't think they really explain her powers too well.
I I think you might be right, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think they do a good job of it, and the fact
Yeah,
that we don't have like a follow up to it doesn't
yeah.
really help either.
What I liked about, Charlotte, though, and, some of the other animes, like that, like ReZero, with the time loop thing, is they try to change such subtle things, and sometimes they even try to change it in a big way, and it never works out.
Yeah,
And sometimes they get real far, still doesn't work out.
you
And,
know. Sorry, go on.
uh, do you ever, like, feel bad for, like, what these characters that have to time travel go through?
It must be trauma. Like I know we were talking about Lucina, how traumatized she must
Yeah,
be. But I mean, like, depending on like the story, time travelers must be really traumatized. I think
bro.
Deadpool has Cable, who's like super sad about like his family, to the point where he's just gonna go kill an innocent child so that his family doesn't die.
Bro, ReZero is definitely up there as well. Like, the main character is going through it. He's visibly traumatized in the show,
I mean, he has
especially,
to be.
like, as the show goes, because they're like, he's literally watched friends die. He's watched, he's had girls tell them they're in love with him before, and then like when he dies, it just goes back. Like no one even sometimes people don't even know him.
I mean,
Like that's how
hey,
far back he
it's fine. I mean, he loves Amelia anyway, so.
went. Yeah. Oh, that poor fool.
uh, yeah, I time travel should like take a real big toll on a character, I think.
Yeah.
I think Flash does it a little bit
Yeah.
too. Like he goes back in time in the show. Literally is the girl he's been crushing on for like the longest admits her feelings for him, goes back in time, doesn't really acknowledge the fact that, hey, just because she said in the last timeline that she loves you doesn't mean that she loves you now or has realized her feelings for you. Kisses her, her boyfriend punches him because, you know, what the fuck, you're just kissing like a random girl who doesn't really like know that she loves you yet. Really fucking weird. Time
Uh,
travel in of itself can be like really complicated if you don't write it properly, I think.
that's oh, bro. That like the creator of Rick and Morty, he doesn't use time travel because he thinks it's too complicated and like it's something he just avoids writing about.
I
Like
don't blame him. You know what
nonsense.
show has really shitty time travel?
What?
Doctor Who.
I fucking shitty time travel should be its own genre.
Doctor Who would be like like the pinnacle of that genre. They even acknowledge it. They're like, "Oh, time is just like this timey wimey bullshit," and it's just like, "Hey, that's really funny to use that term. Can you explain how the fucking mechanics of your show work for once?"
Damn.
I don't hate the show. I actually love the show, but it's so annoying. They don't explain how time travel works, and there's like, oh hey, you can't really like do paradoxes except when you can randomly. Yeah, you can't go back in your own personal timeline to change the tech, except when the Doctor evil self went back in time to steal his other incarnations back in like the fucking Sixth Doctor era, I think. So it's just like, what the fuck is going on? You can do paradoxes, but you can't do paradoxes. Oh, time is malleable. Yet sometimes it's not malleable. This episode contradicts this other episode. Yeah, time is always changing. So it's like, okay. So if time is always changing, then why the hell do the Time Lords have like a directive where they're not allowed to interfere?
So I want to know, would you touch time travel if like
No,
at
I, w-
all?
I
Like would
probably
you ever do it?
I would not. The closest I've gone to it is maybe in some of my stories where young Malcolm goes back and forth from like his homeworld to others. He does mention how time travels differently. So sometimes he'll spend like 50 years away, but yet like only 10 years have passed in his own world.
Pretty cool. That's pretty
Uh,
cool. I think it makes sense logically too.
yeah, like just some worlds, like I guess time. Like, have you watched Narnia or read the
Yeah.
books?
Yeah, I
Narnia,
think like only a couple minutes passed and they were gone for thousands of years.
yeah, something like that essentially. That's what I use. That's the closest thing to like time manipulation I get. I will not touch time travel to like with a 10-foot pole just because of how complicated it is.
Well, I think the time travel that you're talking about like makes sense in terms of space time, right?
Mhm.
Like it's very logical. Yeah, I mean, I see nothing wrong with that. Works well. Uh I don't think I would touch it, but if I did, I'd have very set established rules. And I mean, I actually it is something I could consider messing with one day in like a writing, but it is very sticky. Like
Yeah.
discussing or no, like writing about it.
It is sometimes you also have to keep in mind if you ever want to like do anything clever if you're writing, you have to keep in mind that you have to be as clever. Like, oh, I want to do time
Yeah,
travel. Like, you better be really smart to keep track of all
smart.
these
Yeah.
details. Since I am an idiot, I cannot do it.
I feel like if you're gonna write one, you gotta have that shit like worked well ahead.
Yeah,
or be working with a lot of people that like really want to figure out the story.
that is true. I'm trying to think of a show that does time travel pretty well. Not Doctor Who. Doctor
Steins Gate.
Who, Steins Gate, maybe, yeah.
They actually discuss in the first episode. No, not the first episode. I was actually pissed. This isn't in the anime. If you play the game though, which came out before the anime, there is a scene. It's one of my favorite scenes where they discuss the 11 possible ways time travel is theoretically possible, or something like it. It might have been 11, and they discuss like black holes and shit. I thought that was so well written.
I like how in Star Trek they explain that the time travel, there's like multiple ways to time travel to the
Yeah,
point where the Federation had its own time bureau to like make sure, like to investigate like any time it goes back in the past. And they explain
yeah,
there are paradoxes that exist, like self-completing paradoxes,
yeah,
or like you go back in time and you date like your great great grandmother and you become your own great great grandfather, things like that.
yeah.
And it's funny because they acknowledge that they exist sometimes, but they also acknowledge that sometimes you can manipulate the time stream so that certain things never actually happen. There's like a time Cold War that happens at one point in the franchise
Have
where
you
like
seen Loki?
I have not. That whole thing's about time travel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good as shit. We're not gonna discuss it tonight, but like, I just wanted to ask that.
I gotta watch it, man. I gotta watch it. My father's been watching. He loves it, so I
Yeah.
also have to like put my grab it as well.
We we got anything else to discuss tonight?
Uh, I don't, I don't know. Time travel is confusing. Speaking of time travel, though, now that I think about it, we were talking about like time travel in real life, how it could be
Yeah.
possible, right? Do you remember John Teeter?
Yes.
About how, and have you read up into like how time travel is possible for him? Like he goes with like the
He
timelines method, right?
yeah.
Where like he's from a specific timeline, he traveled back in time to our timeline, explained what things are gonna happen to the future, and then left. And like some of his predictions have come true, quote unquote, come true. Some of them have not. People argue that's because of different timeline, and then, but I mean, like, I, it's clearly bullshit, right?
I'd
Without a
agree with
doubt,
that.
it's clearly bullshit. But you have people who think like, oh well, some of his predictions come true. But it's like the other thing is like his predictions are pretty like basic.
I think the dude was just a troll.
Yeah, I mean it's just an elaborate troll op. I think that people are making money off nowadays. I think
And I'm actually pretty sure they know or theorize who
John
John
Teeter. I'm pretty
yeah,
sure we
Teeter
know who
exactly
he is at this point. I think the theories. One of the guys from the one of the theories has definitely got to be John Teeter.
And the thing about like knowing who he is too, it makes sense knowing some of the information that he had correct.
Yeah,
Uh
without a
funny
doubt.
funny enough though, Steins Gate actually talks about him.
Oh yeah, is he? Do they say he's an actual like
Oh,
person, time traveler, or do they
no,
just
he's somebody
reference him?
that like bombarded a I'll call it like a 4chan forum or something like that. And
Or chant form?
and I don't fucking know. And one of the characters remembers him differently than everyone else
Oh.
because of a different timeline.
So sometimes the characters do like have retain like thoughts of like a different timeline.
So there's one specific reason
Okay.
for that. Like that specific character. I don't know why he's special. I haven't finished the show yet, but
Yeah.
I don't know why he's special, but he retains information about traveling through time.
Well, it's good. Maybe you shouldn't tell me because I also want to like watch or slash play the
It's
game before
it's
anything else.
good, bro. I want to watch it, but I really enjoyed the game, and the game's long, and it's like you got to read and shit.
Yeah, yeah, I
uh,
get you. I mean, it's a visual novel, right?
yeah, and
Yeah, it
I
makes
don't have it on
sense.
PS4. I have it on PS3. What's
Yeah.
the which that kind of reminded me of Space Dandy.
Space
Yeah,
Dandy.
did you watch Space Dandy?
Is that the guy with like the weird haircut?
Yeah.
I think I've seen one episode.
Well, the main character's special, uh, in his own way as well. Like, similar to the main character of Steins Gate.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you have this instance of a character that retains, uh, like, whose presence is kind of, like, versatile through, timelines or parallel dimensions.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't even know how to explain such a concept. Think it's, like, so rarely done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Time travel is weird
Yeah, I could agree with that.
and
Yeah,
hard to write.
Imma stick to the, I love, like, when it's done well and shit,
Yeah.
but, like, yeah,
I mean,
shit
even
gets
like
wild.
as much as I will like riff on Doctor Who for its like time travel,
Yeah.
I also love Doctor Who. So I'm not like ultimately what it boils down to is make a good story. Doesn't necessarily always have to make 100% sense, but as long as it's entertaining, it's fine, right?
Yeah, I could agree with that.
Yeah. But
You saying that just made me think of Quantum Leap.
oh, I fucking love Quantum Leap.
I feel like they should remake that show.
But funny enough,
Yeah.
so Quantum Leap, I was talking about I was talking about Star Trek had a time Cold War,
Yeah.
right? The guy from Quantum Leap is the captain of that series, by the way.
Oh,
It's the same actor, yeah. It's Star Trek Enterprise where they have the time Cold War. I fu-
damn.
There's even an episode where like the other guy from Quantum Leap, the hologram,
Yeah.
he's in like an episode of Star Trek, and they meet each other. It's great. It's perfect.
Nice.
Go watch Doctor Who.
Go watch, Steins Gate. I've mentioned that one specific anime, like, 4 times in this one podcast for 4 different subjects,
Yeah.
and I talked about Groundhog's Day, I think once.
Yes. Anyway,
Alright,
I've been Gabe.
I've been Antoine.
Thank you for listening to the podcast tonight.
Have a good night.
All right, good night. Make sure to check out our socials.
Intro.banter on Instagram.
Intro.banter@gmail.com for our email. And we're available on all major platforms and YouTube under the name
The Introspection and Banter Podcast.
exactly. Take care, guys.